This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us tonight on The Express. I'm indeed Gary Allen, and thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us. I'm certainly happy to be with all of you this evening, and I hope you've had a wonderful week since the last time that we talked. Again, this is The Express with Gary Allen. If you want to keep track of what's going on with me, you can always go to my Facebook page, which is just Gary Allen, A-L-A-N. Or if you want to listen to any of the past shows, go to youtube.com, Gary Allen The Express. You can also go on Thursday night at 7 p.m. on diversitybroadcastnetwork.com. This program repeats itself, as well as on progressivevoices.com. Go to their demand channel or their app channel, and you'll be able to listen to any of the past shows too. TuneIn.com, just go TMV Cafe, and we're all set and be ready to go. So I'm just excited about all that. Before I get into introducing you, Karen, let me just, again, go back to what I was saying. We're going to have a brand new website for me right after the first of the year. I'm very excited about it. By the way, just a special hello to Randy out there. I know he listens every week, and thank you. And thank you to all of you who take a few minutes out of your day to join us here on The Express with your humble host, Gary Allen. Tonight, I'm very, very honored to have Miss Karen Hornsby. Karen is probably one of the finest young ladies. She's a great singer. She has been compared to Celine Dion and Carrie Underwood. And as well as she was also part of the cast of the ABC innovative reality show Rising Star. She has also appeared with many, many celebrities on stage. She has a brand new album out. We're going to talk about that. But more than anything else, we're going to talk about her life. And at a very young age, she was hit with tragedy. She's still going through some ups and downs in her life, and how much faith has played an important role into her life. A very remarkable young lady and a great, great singer. If you ever get a chance to listen to her, if she's going to appear in a neighborhood near you or a concert hall, please go and see her. Just ask Brad Paisley. He really thinks a lot of her. So she also had something to do with Tim Tebow. It's amazing, Karen, before we get into your life, it is absolutely amazing how people just love Tim Tebow. I met the man. I interviewed the man. I think he's a great guy. He's just a lousy quarterback. He's just not a guy who has what it takes to make it in the NFL. And
I guess not.
Now he's done well a few times that he's gotten in there. There is an old saying, and I can say this because I had a brother that spent a number of years in the NFL. He's a Hall of Famer, but there's I guess it's in show business too. A rookie luck coming to a rookie, somebody coming in like the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys now. He's having a tremendous season. Can he repeat it next year? Remains to be seen. I like Tim Tebow. I think he's great. His Christianity has nothing to do with whether I would like the man or not. He's just a really nice guy, but
right, absolutely,
just
great
doesn't
character.
have the complete tools to make it in the NFL. And Florida Gator fans absolutely go nuts when you say that. They say, "How can you say that? It's oh my God! It's like sacrilegious to say that Tim Tebow,
absolutely.
Nice guy, great guy. I'd love him to date my sister. Well, no, he wouldn't date my sister. I wouldn't even date my sister. But I mean, how was he when you were working with him?
Well, I'll just put it to you this way. He was supposed to have lunch, and one of his, the team surgeon actually surprised him with our presence. He ended up putting his lunch down just so that he could speak to us. His character is off the charts. He's absolutely amazing. By this point, if he wasn't the real deal, we would already know it. He is an absolute stand-up guy and stands for everything he says that he stands for. He's just incredible. I'm just honored and privileged to say that we've met him several times, and he's actually had quite an influence on what I do. So, of course, he absolutely holds a special place in my heart.
Well, that's always exciting to do. What in the name of God is that?
I have no idea.
we have had trouble getting together and communicating now. Every time, it's really unbelievable. I liked him. I interviewed him. I interviewed Tim when he came in to do something with the Orlando Predators, and I interviewed him as the sideline reporter, and I found it to be great.
Oh, he's tremendous, and he's the real deal. There's no faking to it.
No.
He's just what he is.
Yeah, he is a gifted athlete, but unfortunately, I don't know what it is. He just can't seem to find it in the NFL. Yet there's, I don't mean to get on this sports thing, but I mean, my God, there's enough bad teams out there with lousy quarterbacks. One of them right up where you live.
One of them right where I live. You would think so. And my goodness, the tickets that would sell if he would be able to be our quarterback.
Because
that's just my humble opinion, though.
Now we have to explain. Karen lives in Jacksonville, Florida, which is just up the road from me, and Tim Tebow is from Jacksonville, Florida. I believe one of the suburbs there. Am I correct?
Yep, you are correct.
And if he was with Jacksonville, now look, I don't know if he would do a better job than the quarterback that's there now. I think the problem is a systemic problem with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But they're all yelling about having Tom Coughlin back. Forget it. Listen, as long as my guys are slightly competitive in that same division, that's okay by me, because I'm going through it, and we have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and that's Andrew Luck, and we can't even get out of our own way. So I have no.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about Karen Hornsby. Karen, at a very young age, you were in a horrific automobile accident. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, this young lady, what she has been through and is currently still going through, would probably pull you in every direction. And I would assume you would agree that if it wasn't for your faith and your family, you might have not come through this whole.
You were right. Absolutely. You reach a point where friends and family and your pastor and everyone that you're in contact with can only take you so far. And even Tim Tebow can take you so far. So yeah.
Well, apparently not far enough, Karen, apparently not far enough.
Right. No. I guess not. So yeah, you do. You have to reach a point where you have to say, okay, my back's against the wall. And I have to put my faith in something. And I just chose to put that in God. And I would be insane at this point with everything that has happened in our life without it.
Right. I was amazed that, a lot of people in our world today, and I'm guilty of this at some points in my life, where you say, God, why me? Not once in everything I've read about you have you ever said, God, why me?
It may not be documented, but I can assure you I've asked myself that question.
Yeah. I mean, it's a natural question. It's not a question that God is offended by, at least according to Dr. Charles Stanley, who as you know, is someone I revere a great deal in this world. But, sometimes I've gone through some terrific things, and I told you earlier tonight in a conversation we had about a friend of mine in California, Rock Bordenoff, who is the voice image guy for this radio show, as well as many others throughout the country. He's going through a rough time right now, and he's not really saying, God, why me? He's just saying, hey, I'll get through this. It's tough right now. It's a tough business. At 19 years old, as I said, you went through a horrific automobile accident. Had it not been for an off-duty police officer who was brave enough to get you out of the car, you might not even be with us, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. My car, as you said, hit the back end of a log trailer. Thankfully, it had no logs on it. And immediately my car caught on fire. And the crazy thing about that incident is the state trooper by the name of Milton Brown was not even called to the accident. He actually drove up on it. I didn't know that, obviously, or none of my family knew that until later on, which he actually come to visit us the next day. I never met him a day in my life, of course. And he made sure he found our address and wanted to come by and see how I was doing. Because the crazy thing is even though I was surrounded by flames, not the first hair on my head was even singed. And they thought I should have died just from the amount of carbon dioxide that I had inhaled. But, he come by the next day to tell me. He says, I just want to let you know that I was not called to your accident, but I actually drove up on your accident. And I was actually going to visit a friend, but when I drove by my friend's home, his vehicle was not where it always is parked. So I just drove on by, and when I did, I saw your accident. And he says, and I called that friend this morning to tell him, hey, I was going to come by and see you, but I didn't see your car there. And he said there was quite a quiet, silent moment on the other end of the phone. And instead, his friend spoke up and said, Milton, it's really interesting you say that. He says, because for some reason yesterday, I felt like I needed to park my car behind my house. I have no idea why, but he felt like I needed to park my car behind my house. He's like, so I was home. And immediately we all just started falling into tears, because that was one of the first big moments for me to know that there must be a plan, because I could have easily left this world at that very moment. I definitely looked death in the face during that moment, because I was completely out of it, at the mercy of someone risking their life to get me out, and he did.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to recover?
It actually didn't take very long. All that really happened was my hand was crushed. Matter of fact, they didn't know that I would ever use my left hand again, because I broke every, I believe they're called metacarpals, in my hand. And they were like, I'm not really sure you'll ever use it again. But I had hand surgery, and thankfully was put in the hands of a great hand surgeon. And he repaired my hand, and through lots of therapy and hard-headedness on my part, I've continued to use the hand. So it didn't really take very long. Now my lungs, had to repair themselves from all the carbon dioxide, as I had said. And that recovered, which is quite interesting, because I am a vocal artist, as I'm sure we'll talk about. So,
Yes.
I was obviously a little bit of a scary moment for me as well, but I recovered.
Yeah. We're talking to Karen Hornsby, songwriter, singer, who has appeared on Rising Star. We're going to get to how she got on the program with that. You state in your biography, I never asked to be a songwriter. It's not something I ever aspired to be. And I was happy being a worship leader at a little church. And that's when everything fell apart. Do you think that, with that being said, and we're going to get to your husband and your beautiful little daughter here in a minute, do you think in your particular case, whether you know it or not, and of course none of us know the plan that God has for us, I wish he'd reveal himself to me, what he has for me going.
Right.
I wish he would reveal to me what he wants me to do, but at any particular rate, isn't it amazing how things happen for us over here and we don't understand why, and the next thing you know, boom, suddenly these doors are opening up. Here you were, content and happy to be in the church and just being a worship leader, and then suddenly, boom, here you are, singer, songwriter, on television, on stage with Brad Paisley, which a lot of women probably are very envious of you for. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big country person. But every year it's like, how many country award shows are there? It's like, oh my God.
Well, there's apparently not enough, because they keep adding some more. So it's just fun to go to, right? Yeah.
But yes, which you will. You're going to win tons of these things. But talk about that a little bit. Again, I never asked to be a songwriter, and you were a worship leader. How and what did that all suddenly put itself together for you?
I've said many times, when you don't know what's inside of you until, a lot of times for me, I didn't know what was inside of me until this tragedy that hit my family really hit my family like it did. And you just reach a point where everything that you used to do and say just doesn't seem to be enough. And you reach a point of desperation. You look for different avenues and ways to say, God, I just need your attention. I need your help on a level that I've never needed it before. And in that moment of desperation, things came out that I didn't know was there, and one of them being songwriting. My brother's a songwriter, and I always enjoyed singing the songs that he would write, but never, as I said, just really had a strong desire to just sit down and write songs. I just loved to be in the vocal artist. However, as I said, we found out this tragic news about my little girl that I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. And at that moment of sheer desperation, where my heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest and thrown into a meat grinder, I found myself at a baby grand piano in the Ronald McDonald House, pouring my heart out to God in ways that I had never done before. I thought I had been desperate before.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had felt pain before, not to this degree. It was completely different, obviously. And when I said, I need you, Lord, this time, it was totally different than every other time that I had said, I need you, Lord. And so out of that moment, just because of a way for me to just cope and kind of get through that horrible report that we had just received, I found myself penning this song. My husband and I both, crying and just thinking it was just for us and just our way of saying, God, this is hard. This is difficult, and everybody else has done everything for us that they can, and now you're the only one that can do something. So we're asking you to please do it.
And let's explain to everybody why you were at the Ronald McDonald House. You weren't there just to pick up lunch.
No.
For those of you that are not familiar with it, the Ronald McDonald Corporation, or the McDonald's Corporation, has homes, I guess, all over the country, right?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Which families who have children that are in hospitals, etc., can stay there for free, I believe, is one of the things.
Yeah.
But explain your beautiful 2-year-old daughter, and I'm kind of tearing up now thinking about it. She was diagnosed at the age of 2 with brain cancer, and she has been through, pardon the expression, hell and back, and she's still not 100%.
No.
She lost her sight, and she's still not 100%. So when you wrote the song, you said, I need you, Lord, you weren't kidding.
No.
You weren't kidding by any stretch.
No, as you said, it was, and another thing that kind of got us to that point, just to kind of give you all and your listeners a timeline. In June of 2005, so that everybody can get the full picture, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And we were like, where did that come from? What in the world? That's crazy. He had just a year before that just returned from Iraq. But still, we were like, man, this is crazy. Little did we know that 4 months later, our 2-year-old little girl would be diagnosed with brain cancer, optic glioma. So my husband was okay. They did surgery on him. My daughter, they did an 8-hour brain surgery on her, and 3 days later is when she lost her sight. And she literally could see 20/20 vision. The next day, she's seeing black, and for 2 weeks solid, begged mommy to turn the lights on, which was, as you said, hell. Yeah. There's really no way other than that to describe it. And, pray it doesn't offend anyone, but that's just where you are. And so with that being said, my daughter went through a year of chemotherapy, and even though she went blind, she adjusted. She did pretty well considering the circumstances, and for a year she was on chemotherapy. A year after, right when my daughter is coming off of chemotherapy, my husband becomes symptomatic again, and all of a sudden found out that his cancer had spread to his lymph nodes. So here's my daughter just recovering from her chemotherapy, and we seem to be getting things back to quote unquote normal, whatever that may be. And the next thing you know, my husband's being re-diagnosed with cancer. And now this time he does have to receive chemotherapy. So my daughter's just getting off of it. Now my husband's getting on chemotherapy. Little did we know, 3 months later, after my husband's back on chemotherapy and my daughter has just gotten off of chemotherapy, she starts getting symptomatic again. So my daughter gets put back on chemotherapy. I know it's such a story that you almost feel like, can this be real? I was living it. And I was asking myself that, like, can this be real? Could this really happen to one family? I mean, this is insane. I mean, I know the Bible says he would never put more on us than we can bear. And I'm not bending, I'm breaking. My tree is breaking at this point. And so, however, my daughter is back on chemotherapy, and my husband, Went through 9 weeks of it, and his chemotherapy was fine. And thankfully, I have the good report to say that my husband now is in 8 years of remission.
Oh, thank God.
So his chemotherapy did its job, and he has been cancer-free for the last 8 years. Unfortunately for my daughter, the story has not been the same.
Mm.
While my daughter was on her second round of chemotherapy, she was on it again for a year. Once she come off of the chemotherapy, once again, she got symptomatic again. So it forced our hand to come to Jacksonville, Florida, where we could meet another neurosurgeon and try some other type of avenue of killing this chemotherapy. It was at that doctor's appointment that we went to for here in Jacksonville, where the neurosurgeon looked at us and said, "We've done everything we can do for your child. What we're going to do is just do everything we can to keep her comfortable and keep her alive until something else finally comes along to kill this cancer."
God.
The worst report that a parent could hear.
Oh, yeah.
It's the report that no parent wants to hear.
Yeah.
And it was at that moment that we left that doctor's appointment. I looked my little girl in the eyes and just believed with everything in me that I serve a God that actually has the final say so and not her neurosurgeon. And that's when I sat down at the baby grand piano and began to write the song. Say, "Lord, doctors have done everything they can. Family's done everything they can. Pastor said everything that he can say.
Yeah.
It's your turn. It's your turn, God. I'm leaning on you." And so I did. And then that's when I wrote the song, "I Need You, Lord." First song I've ever written in my life. And so, like I said, out of sheer desperation, I just began to sing that song, not knowing where. I mean, coming from places I've never felt before in my life. And unfortunately, since then, my daughter has ultimately had to have 5 rounds of chemotherapy, proton beam radiation, 2 major brain surgeries, followed by 3 strokes.
Oh, my
and
God.
all of that has left her blind. She's now unable to speak, and she also has very limited mobility. So her quality of life is extremely poor.
Yes. Yes. I have not a similar story, but my mother was always plagued with cancer. Always. Every time I turned around from the age of 8 years old until she passed away back in 93, she was plagued with cancer at one time or another. And I remember I was telling my program director and owner of the station, John Harper, today. By the way, we're talking to Karen Hornsby, singer and songwriter. You're listening to The Express on TMV Cafe. This is Gary Allen with you, and Karen Hornsby is my guest for this evening. My mother was always plagued with cancer, and I expected a phone call at any minute when I was in middle school and junior high school and et cetera. Even when I was in the military and I was away living in LA, et cetera, I always expected a phone call. At one time, though, she went for chemotherapy back in the day, back in the 60s, when it was, it's not fun now, it's brutal, but it was even more so back then. And she finally turned to her doctors one day and just said, "I've had enough, no more. If I die, I die, but I'm not going through chemotherapy. This is interfering in my business. This is interfering in my family. Whatever happens, I'm putting it in God's hands." Well, that was in the 60s. My mother died in 1993.
Oh, my goodness.
She outlived the doctors.
Wow.
She outlived the nurses. She outlived everybody.
Incredible.
She almost outlived all her friends. There were 3 or 4 still alive when she passed away, but she almost outlived all of them. So
Incredible.
Pure determination on her part. But it is amazing how God does work through some of our worst pain to get us where he wants us to be. It may not be where we thought we wanted to be, but it's where he wants us to be.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, because, as a matter of fact, during the time that we stayed at the Ronald McDonald House, which was mostly during the summer too, we were always back and forth before we moved to Jacksonville at the Ronald McDonald House, which is obviously why we moved to Jacksonville, was because of our daughter. The summer of 2009 is when she was receiving proton beam radiation, so we were at the Ronald McDonald House for 10 weeks. It would have been very hard without the Ronald McDonald House. But I was reading a book while I was there, and you said earlier, you ask yourself, why God, why God? I would actually begin to ask myself the question, God, I've seen you do miracles. I was raised in a home that I literally seen my mom lay hands on people and recover. And I know that's super religious and, and nowadays it seems, almost hard to even say those things because we don't see as much of it. It doesn't seem nowadays as we used to when I was growing up, but I'd seen miracles. And because my mom and dad traveled as well with music for years and Southern gospel music. Mm-hmm. And I just would say, God, I've seen you do miracles. Why are you not doing this? I've begged you and begged you and begged you. And I'm not sure why you're not doing it. And one day I was reading this quote to go with what you just said. With everything in me, I know this was an answer to that particular prayer, was the book said that everything that you're going through is, with all these trials, with all these struggles, it's just simply God developing your character to catch up to your calling. Mm-hmm. And that changed my life. It literally wrecked me at that very moment that I read it. And I said, I don't like it. I wish there were definitely other ways that you could shape my character. But then he reminded me of Job, and then he reminded me of Joseph. And so many, Paul, and so many people in the Bible who went through it, and David, who went through their hell on earth. To be prepared and capable of fulfilling the call that God put them on this earth to accomplish. And I'm still having that character development, if you will, to this very moment, and always will. I believe we're always in the palm of God's hand, and he's always developing our character. And so that was one of the big aha moments for me. And saying, Karen, I've not turned my back on you, and I haven't not seen what you're going through. I just have a purpose in all the suffering. Yeah. And that is a hard pill to swallow.
Well, I will tell you, as a gentleman who's considerably older than you, young lady, that it never stops. Even when you reach my grand old age of 64, it never stops. He's always teaching you a new lesson. And sometimes the lesson... I believe it. Sometimes the lesson is there to say, hey, you haven't really been talking to me lately. And I think that's a very important part of everyone's life. If you're Christian, if you're not Christian, then this means nothing to you for our listeners out there. But if you're a Christian and you're going through a horrible time, sometimes it's God's way of saying, hey, you need to reconnect with me here. Before you go over here to ask questions, come to me, talk to me. I mean, I want to kind of get off that for a moment if we could. I want to kind of divert back to your childhood. Actually, before you were born, your uncle proclaimed to your mother that you were born to be a singer.
I know, right? It's crazy. Yeah, my mother and father actually lost a child in an automobile accident. And it was quite tragic, obviously, for my mother and father, and they didn't plan on having any more children. But my mom was just hell-bent to have another child and wanted another little girl. And so she prayed and prayed for that. And my uncle had a dream about me, but didn't say anything to my mom. And she goes to the doctor. Back then in the 70s, giving my age away, they used the heart rate to decide if you were a boy or girl. And they kept telling my mom I was a little boy. Yeah, they used the heart rate. And so they were like, oh, you're going to have another little boy. And so she was so heartbroken. And then my uncle said, Edie, I wasn't going to tell you this, but I had a dream about your little girl. And in that dream, she was singing like a little bird. And it, just really registered with my mom. And she's like, oh, wow. So until the day I was born, the doctors just knew I was a boy. And so since then, my mom said, I entered this world, and I said, here I am. And she's not been able to shut me up ever since. So yeah, that's quite interesting. And then here I am. And it's what I love to do. I'd sleep on the stage if I could.
Where is he now? Where's your uncle now?
He has actually passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
He's in the heavens, yeah.
Yes, he's
where he wanted to be for a long time. He's where he wanted to be for a long time.
Yeah, I had a family member, my father, who, when my mother passed away, he wanted to be with my mother in the worst way. And of course, I kept telling him for years when he used to say to me, do you think I'm going to heaven? And I'd say, Dad, not really. Mom doesn't want you up there yet. So, kind of relax. And he says, well, why don't you want me in heaven? I said, Dad, you'll get to heaven. But, Mom wants a vacation from you for now,
That's funny.
But yeah. And I used to tease him about it all the time. I used to tease him all about
That's
all the time.
awesome.
Were you a musical child? I mean, I know you were, you were in a church and everything else in the choir and stuff,
Hmm.
but was it something that you thought as an early childhood? Hey, I see Tammy Wynette, I see this one, I see that one.
Right.
That's what I want to do. This is where I want to go. Or was it like I said earlier, you were content to be a worship leader in your church?
Yeah. Well, music has been in my blood. It is absolutely in my blood. And I think I said earlier, and I think I alluded to it earlier, is my mom and dad actually had a Southern gospel group for years and years. And I would literally get off the school bus on Friday afternoons, get on their tour bus, going all weekend long, and then get back up on Monday morning to do it all over again for years and years, all the way through until my middle school years. My mom and dad did that every weekend.
Mm.
And so I actually initially hated it. I did. Well, I can't say I hated it. I didn't like it because it seemed to pull me away from the social life that I wanted when I was
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
Because all I did was get on a tour bus and sing all weekend and do it again. And I didn't get to do some of the things that some of the other kids got to do on the weekends. Because I was busy traveling with my mom and dad on the tour bus. Now they always had me singing with them though. Ever since I was 10 years old, I sang with them full time, and I enjoyed singing. I loved the singing, but I really didn't like the heartache that I seen that my mom and dad would go through.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like always having to be gone on every weekend. But music was in my blood, and I've tried over the years, and maybe we'll get into that part of the story later. But because I had seen my mom and dad go through so much, I actually was very content with just doing the simple worship scene, just do something of that nature, and it didn't seem to be threatening the devil's kingdom too much, if you know what I mean. And what I really mean by that is, I watched my mom and dad push against the gates of hell, and I saw very quickly and learned at a very early age, Satan's not going to sit back and watch you do it. He's going to try to stop you. So all hell assailed against my family all the time. And so I didn't want to go through that. I wanted to just have the simple, boring life. Unfortunately, quite the opposite.
No, you said
opposite has happened.
Yeah, we're talking to Karen Hornsby, singer and songwriter, and we're going to get to the part where she got on ABC's wonderful show, Rising Star. You said something interesting that kind of relates to me. It's amazing how when I have different guests, how certain things relate to me. You said how you were disappointed as a child to go off with your mom and dad on the weekends because you wanted to be with your schoolmates playing and etc. But look at the education you got back then. Because look at what you're doing now, and your classmates are doing nothing.
No.
Yeah, and in other words, you're on stage with Brad Paisley and all these other famous people. You cut an album not far from here at Full Sail, a place that I know very well. I mean, it's absolutely amazing to me.
Crazy, I know.
Because I grew up in the business. I mean, I grew up with an uncle, and I grew up with a young man whose mother was a casting director. So I got in all the Tony Rome movies that were filmed at the Fontainebleau, and I was an extra in The Godfather, in the wedding scene, and I mean,
oh my gosh.
And I wanted to go off with my friends too and have a summer vacation, but the education that you get and the professionalism you learn is just unbelievable. Because now you turn it around and you go, gee, I'm having the time of my life now.
The experience is definitely priceless, for sure.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
God was working with you back then.
Yeah, he was. And that's the way God works. He's working things out that you don't know. And as we, progress in the story, that has been really, really, really real for me over the last couple of years. How God is working things out when you don't know he is. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. When you sit down I've asked writers, authors about this. Sometimes writing can be a lonely business. I've known living in Los Angeles and being around a lot of singers, as I have with Engelbert and Tom Jones and Michael blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry. I'm just every time I've worked with him, that's what blah 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 blah. blah, blah.
Oh, that's
When
so great.
I go to introduce him on stage, at the last time I worked with him, which was in January of this year, which was my last contract as an opening act, I remember I had to introduce him, and I go, this guy from Canada back here wants to come up here and sing for you. I only know him briefly. His name is Michael blah, 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 blah. Would you give him a nice round of applause?
Oh,
My
my
just
gosh.
guys laughing. He's just, and having worked with a lot of different celebrities, the greatest things that go on are backstage. It's not on stage.
Oh, gosh, yeah, no.
It's backstage conversations,
Yeah.
everything like that.
It is. That is for sure.
Who were your heroes growing up? I mean, who were the people you looked to? Like I mentioned, Loretta Lynn and Tammy Wynette and people like that.
Yeah.
People you look to develop a style, because as a comic, I would look at this guy and steal this mannerism or take that thing and say, oh, that fits into what I'm doing. Was that the way it was for you as you were discovering who you were?
Yeah, a little bit. It definitely was. Not as a songwriter as much, of course, but definitely as a vocal artist. As I told you, matter of fact, my parents did a really good job of helping me appreciate different types of genres in growing up. So I appreciate all the different types of genres, but there was one vocalist. There's always that one that always sticks out to you and that you connect with the most. And it was always, believe it or not, I know this is completely random, but it was completely and utterly, without no doubt whatsoever, Celine Dion. Always loved Celine Dion. Her vocals were always my favorite. But now, as far as some of the things that shaped the way that I also sing in the Christian industry, as I told you earlier, my family loves Southern gospel music, so I grew up listening to people like the Hensons. The Perrys, the Hoppers, Kim Greenhopper was always one of my favorites. Sopranos, I would always listen to her big belting notes that she would always belt out. So yeah, I always loved listening to them. As far as country, my mom and dad always loved their Loretta Lynn's, and the Patsy Clines, and Conway Twitty, all those people.
I always loved that name. I always loved that. Conway Twitty. Conway Twitty. Who names a kid Conway?
I don't know.
I mean, that's a name from
Conway Twitty's parents.
Yeah, that's like a name from the South. It's, and he was a nice looking feller. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, he was a nice
absolutely.
looking fella. He was a nice looking.
Yeah. But you can't leave Elvis off of the list either. I mean, my goodness. He was on repeat.
Do you know how many Elvis impersonators I know? I mean, seriously.
Oh, can you imagine?
And yet, as wonderful as he was, and he was a, you could watch his movies. You could have your children watch his movies, like Jerry Lewis. You could have your kids watch his movies, and you don't have to fear of anything that's going to insult anybody. But I mean, a guy who collected velvet paintings. I'm sorry, I just, that was his whole thing, velvet paintings, and all I can see. All I see is
something to him, apparently, Gary. I mean, he liked it, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, he must have, because he collected enough of them. But how many dogs sitting around a poker table can you collect? I mean,
That's hilarious.
When you're
Bob,
writing,
you got.
Huh?
I would say that's hilarious.
I'm crazy. I'm crazy. I'm absolutely crazy.
I'm enjoying it.
When you sit down to write a song, and you've written some songs with some absolutely beautiful titles that I'm going to get to right now a little bit. But when you sit down, which was one of my initial questions, writing a book is one thing, and sometimes you get writer's cramp and you get a little out there and you have to sit back and take away. What comes first for you, or does it depend on where the inspiration is from? Is it the lyrics, or is it the melody?
Usually the melody. I like the melody, and I try to the melody is what always hooks me big time. Matter of fact, there's like some songs, I don't know the words at all, but I can go with the melody all day long. So I'm a melody kind of girl. Yeah, I'm a melody kind of girl. But now I will have to say for my writing, most of my writing, though, I will have to say for me personally is because of our hardships and things that my family faced. there was, like, for example, All Things Are Possible. I was a little upset that day that I wrote that song. I was mad at the enemy, and I was like, you know what? I don't have to take this. I have authority over this. And so I began to get mad and start gearing that energy and that frustration towards reminding the devil, I have authority over this. And so it obviously depended on the moment that we were in, especially, most of them obviously being with my little girl. But so, yeah, and use me, one of those stories of, as I told you earlier, doing this is not easy. No. I mean, oh my gosh, the entertainment business, period, was not something I just grew up and said, oh my God, I've got to be in the entertainment business. Matter of fact, you just heard me say I kind of ran from it the best that I could. I didn't choose it, but with that being said, I finally said, okay, just this is what I have to go through, use it.
Yeah.
If we're going to go through this, don't let it be in vain. Yeah. Don't let my story and my daughter's life be in vain. Do something with it, And so that's kind of how songwriting came along for me. I talked to so many people that were going through their struggles. Right. And what it is that they were facing and what they said that they would get from my story. And that would also give me ideas of songs to write to help them, because that's what so many people did for us, Gary. When you're in the hospital and those walls start caving in on you, it was so great to always have a friend to give the right word at the right time, or hear the right song at the right time, or, see a Facebook post at the right time. Yeah. And so that's what I want my music to be as well.
We're talking to Karen Hornsby, singer and songwriter. Also, she was on the amazing ABC show, Rising Star. I wrote here as I was going through the different titles of your music, which, by the way, how can they get a hold of your album, your CD?
KarenHornsby.com.
KarenHornsby.com.
KarenHornsby.com, yeah.
There's an old saying that the eyes are the windows of the soul, and I've always said that music must be the rhythm at which it moves. Do you agree with that?
I do. My goodness. Yeah, very well said.
I'm getting deep all of a sudden. I'm getting deep.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to follow that. That was incredible. I want to leave it just like that.
Some of the title, you said something interesting too. You just said that, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to fight back. Yeah. Well, we can control it. I mean, Jesus fought the devil. He said, don't tempt me. Don't tempt God. Yeah. I can live without bread alone. I can survive. I've done it up till now. And we can, if you just don't give up, sometimes
it's all a mentality thing, for sure.
The defeat comes and overtakes us sometimes when we allow it to do that.
Right. I totally agree.
I mean, there are times, I'll be honest with you. I mean, when my mother and father died, there was not much I could do about it. It was their time to go. But prior to that, my mother fought like the dickens, and I'm sure your little girl is fighting like crazy to get back to where she needs to be. And God will have an answer for you on the other end. But there's one title that I was really kind of puzzled by, because this is not your character, and I don't know you that well, but I've gotten to know you well enough that I can call you up and talk as Elmo.
Yes, you have. That's great.
The song is I Surrender. Was that I surrender to God for whatever you want me to do? Because I don't know where the thought process for that song came from, but I can only imagine maybe that's where you were going with it.
Yes, 110%. You hit the nail on the head. And it goes with what I was just saying about Use Me as well. And the story that I heard already said about my mother and father, I really, honestly, Gary, fought going into this business. And you have to call it business, or whatever, just getting into this industry. I fought it. As I told you, I've seen what my family went through. I have seen what celebrities go through. I've seen what people that are in the limelight go through, and I didn't want it. I knew where my heart was, and that if I started pursuing that, as I said earlier, I knew, and I know the enemy's not going to sit back and allow me to push against the gates of hell and let me do it easily. It's going to be a fight. And it was just a fight that I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to be able to have the quote unquote normal life, whatever that might be, and not stir up too many things, and just do the worship leader thing. And finally, out of just sheer misery, which is where I was, and because of seeing my daughter's story And what it was starting, I would sing some of my songs, and it would seem, Gary, to validate their pain and what they were going through. And finally, one day, because of enough people saying, "Why are you not doing this?" I finally said, "I surrender. I'm done. I'm tired of fighting this. I'm tired of feeling miserable. I know there's a purpose in all this suffering. It's not in vain. God knew all this was going to come my way. He's preparing me for this calling. So I'm going for it. Is it going to be easy?
No.
It's not. It's not going to be easy. But there's nothing that God didn't call us to do that he won't qualify us for. I got a long way to go, Gary. I have so much growing to do. There's so much that I still have to learn. But that song, I Surrender, was 100% saying, okay, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I know it's not going to be easy, but God, I'm going to be better off with you by my side, so I'll do it.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, so that's what I decided to do. And yeah, that's 100%. You listen to the lyrics, and I tried to write it in a way too, that it wasn't just specific to surrendering to the call that was on your life, but also surrendering, if you happen to not be a Christ follower, that, that it definitely applies in that way as well, and hey, I'm tired of this type of life that I'm living. I want something new in my life, whatever that may be, and you surrender to it.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's what that song is.
We're talking to Karen Hornsby, singer and songwriter, and now we're going to get to the interesting part of how she got on Rising Star. And I want to emphasize to a lot of people, because a lot of people out there don't understand about a lot of these shows. Now, American Idol was a little bit different, but most of the shows that are like this, and Karen, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but over the years, this is what I've discovered. Most of the people that are like, comedy shows, shows for the number one comic and singers and stuff, these are not just people that have walked in off the street that suddenly yesterday started singing. I mean, you have a background. I would imagine. I'll be honest with you, Karen. I didn't really watch. I'm not into the competition shows. I only watched American Idol the first few years.
I'm disappointed. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I only watched American Idol for the first 3 or 4 shows to see the people who had no talent go, well, my mother said I could sing great, and I'll be back. I'll have my own show, and and they had no business being there. It'd be like me suddenly walking into a hospital tomorrow morning and trying to perform surgery. Forget it. I'm Jewish, but I ain't that Jewish.
Oh, that's hilarious.
The bottom line is, were you and your fellow contestants, you already had a number of years of experience at doing what at your craft of singing, correct?
Yes, absolutely. As I said earlier, I grew up on a tour bus with my mom and dad, but, obviously not to that level. So yeah, I definitely had some experience, but as far as the status, I didn't have the status that a lot of them had going into the show. And I don't know if that's something you were going to get into or not, but, for most of them, there was a certain status they needed you to have before they would even entertain you for that show. So for me to have been picked for this show and to have basically no status, especially in comparison to many of them that was on the show, I was utterly shocked.
Well, get into that a second. When you're talking about status, for most people who do not understand, usually you're talking about representation. Maybe performed as an opening act for somebody, or they have been in Vegas for a while, something along those lines.
Right, absolutely. I already have a lot of the things that you fight for when you move to Nashville or to LA to get, which managers, agents, labels, all these things, followers, because now it's social media is a serious driving force in the industry now, and a lot of them already had such a huge fan base from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all of them already had this huge following. And I didn't. I went into Rising Star with maybe 800 followers on my fan page. And so, here's most of them had 40,000 followers, 100,000 followers, on whatever, platform it was. And so yeah, I was quite surprised. I mean, I have my thoughts about it, but yeah, I was quite interested that they would pick a no name like me to be on the show.
But the beautiful part about this is you have a wonderful relationship with the 3 judges that were on there, to the point where they encouraged you. sort of took you underneath their wing, and even Brad Paisley had you on stage with him performing, and that had to be a knockout experience.
Absolutely incredible experience. You know, we were saying earlier that you don't know that God's working when He is. And I would have never guessed in a million years when Gabby was diagnosed with cancer and my husband was diagnosed with cancer, or I had my car wreck, you know, or my husband was gone in Iraq when I gave birth to Gabby. You know, all these different things that had happened to us played a humongous role in the position that I found myself on Rising Star. And it was actually the moment that was super surreal for me was actually the day after I was eliminated from the show. I enjoyed the show and I loved it a lot. I mean, but the moment that was super surreal for me was after I was eliminated from the show. Kesha actually really was attracted to me and our story, and to the point that the Monday after our show, she had her assistant call me and say, Kesha says she does not want you to leave LA until she speaks to you. And so she moved her schedule around to speak with me and encourage me. And she really kind of felt like I would give up on singing. And so she wanted to make sure that that was not the case. And really just told me, your story is amazing, and I hope you just continue to share it. And it was at that moment that I kind of had this mind-moving moment, if you know what I mean when I say that, where it seemed like all of a sudden I went all the way back to the summer of 2005 when my husband was first diagnosed with cancer, to all the way forward to that moment. And I really kind of feel like at that moment I heard or felt something, you know, I don't want to say I heard something say, but I felt like I knew this moment was coming, and I needed to prepare you for this table that you're sitting at now, because I love Kesha like I love you. And it was really amazing for me to feel that and say, wow, you know, there was purpose in all the suffering. There was purpose in everything that we have went through. And then, so for 2.5 hours, Kesha sat there and talked to me about, I mean, numerous things for 2.5 hours. And then 2 weeks later, after I was eliminated from the show, was when Brad Paisley called me up. He's like, hey, I'm going to be in Florida. You want to come see me? And I was like, sure, let me call my people. Maybe I'm available. No, I'm just kidding. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, for sure, I want to come see you. So took my daughter with me. We went to Tampa, which is where he was at. And when we got backstage, his 2 little boys actually ran out to meet my little girl, which was unbelievable for me. Absolutely unbelievable for me, because Brad Paisley is super private with his boys. And so to see his 2 boys play with Gabby was, such a moment that I'll never forget. And right before he starts to walk on stage is when he says, hey, by the way, do you sing Natural Woman in B flat? And I was like, I'm not really sure why you're asking me that question, but I think so. He's like, hey, well, I'm going to have you go on stage B, and I'm going to play your Natural Woman for you, and I want you to sing it. I was like, what? We've not even rehearsed this. That is great. That's just crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So he threw me on the stage, and I sang it, and I was like, oh, my God, this is really happening, which was super fun.
And where are you at now with your career with all of that? I know that you're performing around, so talk to us a little bit about that.
I do a lot of women's events, Gary. I've noticed, which of course, you know, that would seem to be the natural place for me to be. And I'm actually going to speak at a youth event that's next week in LA. And so I'm doing a lot of speaking as much as I am singing, which is another thing that I was not thinking was going to happen, but did happen, you know, something I did not expect to happen. But of course, people are enamored with our story and want to hear a story and the story behind the music. Because once you understand where that song came from, the appreciation or the message of that song is bumped up tremendously.
Yeah.
So I find myself speaking and singing, or speaking as much as I am singing now, all over the country, and I'm super excited about it. It's still hard for me to even say that because it doesn't seem to still be real, but I'm just so blessed and so honored and just so thankful to be a vessel that God is using to spread His word. So I'm very humbled by the whole thing.
Yeah, and it really comes together. And when you're out there with people, they're usually very, very, very nice and stuff. But you talk
Yeah.
about your situation being thrown on stage. I got a telephone call once, about 25, 30 years ago, when I first started out doing comedy, and it was from the Spinners. And I knew
Oh.
them. I had met them. I love their music. I mean, I'm a big Motown fan.
Me
And
too. Me too.
and they called me up and said, "Hey, our comedian who got sick and can't perform tonight, would you consider coming in, Gare, and doing like 20 minutes for us just so we have an opening act?" And I said, and it was the bass singer, Purvis Jackson, and God rest his soul. And I said, "Purvis, I'm a white boy." And and he said, to me, he says, "Oh, that's all right, Gary. We understand that." I says, "Now, my humor is not going to really go over in your audience." And he says, "Oh, that's
Oh
all right, Gary.
my.
You just give it your best." So I went out there and I'm sweating bullets like crazy and trying to do my humor. And some lady in the back yells out. She said, "You sure trying, white boy, and we think you're fine. So you
Oh
keep
my.
going." And it was just funny. I mean, it was just you talk about being put into and it happens like that in show business.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I mean, something like that. I know you go around and you speak on all aspects of life at women's groups and stuff like that. Talk about that for a couple of minutes, and then I have one final question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I've kind of alluded to some of the things that I actually speak about when I travel and speak at these women's events, primarily women's events. I do also, just regular church events and things. But one of the things that I find to be very important when I travel and I speak and sing is not to just tell my story, because everybody's got one, Gary.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got a story. But to me, the important part is, what did you learn from the story?
Mm-hmm.
And what is God teaching you through all of the things that you're going through? Because the biggest thing that I believe I have learned through this whole process is that there truly is purpose in all the suffering. And it's hard to see that when you're in the middle of the suffering.
Yes.
When you're in the middle of the pain. And you can see no good. I mean, I've asked myself 1,000 times, God, what good could come out of my daughter not seeing this beautiful place that you've created? And you can get so wrapped up in the negativity and what should be or what should not be. And you get so wrapped up in those moments that you'll forget and you can't see the purpose for it. I did not know, or would have never thought in a million years, that I would be sitting across the table from Kesha, Ludacris, Josh Groban,
Mm-hmm.
or even Brad Paisley, or Tim Tebow, all these people.
Mm-hmm.
And them look and say, what an inspiration you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it would not be the case, would not have had all those opportunities, Gary, if I hadn't have been through all of the things that my family had been through.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest thing that I try to help people to understand, there is purpose in all the suffering, and try your best to not see your circumstances as a letdown or a stumbling block, but look at it as God is framing you for something great.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way he can get you prepared is to develop your character to catch up to your calling, like I said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So there's things that God has to do in our life and things he has to shape us to accomplish all the things that he put us on this earth to accomplish, because we're all here for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said earlier, it doesn't always unfold the way we want it to unfold. Life doesn't happen the way we want it to, but God knows better. I truly believe that. For me personally, God knows better. And there is a purpose and things that God put you on this earth to accomplish. He had this grand idea, and then he created you, and he wanted you to accomplish these amazing and great things. And so, and instead of all of these tragedies and things and looking at it as just hurt and pain, which it is, it absolutely is all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's human nature to automatically hate it and feel bad and question God about it. But to do your best to always turn the table on the enemy and say, you know what, this sucks. I may not be able to pay this electricity bill, but there's something great coming out of this. There truly is. There's something God's preparing me for. So I try to really encourage people to say, God's just framing you.
Yeah.
That's all he's doing. With whatever you're going through right now, he's just preparing you for greatness. There's something good coming in ahead for you, or you would not be going through this right now.
Absolutely.
So that's a lot of what I do and I speak about when I travel at these events and when I sing and just to let them know there's a purpose on their life, and all these tragedies and things that they're going through is just setting them up for greatness.
Karen Hornsby has been our guest for the last hour here on The Express with Gary Allan. Thank you so much, Karen, for taking the time to join us. It really was fun.
Pleasure.
I told you it would go by fast,
I know it does, doesn't it?
It does.
But it was fun. It always goes by when you're having fun.
Oh, it always does. And thank you so much again. And for the last time, KarenHornsbyMusic.com is where people can find out all about you.
KarenHornsby.com.
Oh,
yes.
KarenHornsby.com.
KarenHornsby.com. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. You can find me anywhere. Karen Hornsby.
All right, young lady. Thank you so much. I'll probably give you a buzz tomorrow or maybe later tonight, but thank you so very much.
You're so very welcome. Everyone have a blessed evening. God bless you all.
All right. And I want to thank everybody out there for joining us here on The Express. This is Gary Allan, and you can catch me on Facebook at Gary Allan, YouTube.com, Gary Allan The Express. Thursday night, this program will repeat itself on DiversityBroadcastNetwork.com, also on ProgressiveVoices.com on their demand channel as well as their app, and TuneIn.com go with TMV, put it in there, and you'll hear my show and everybody else's. Thank you so very much for taking the time out of your day to join us here on The Express. This is Gary Allan saying until next week, take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allan. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allan. See you next time on The Express.